It's time for an all-new episode of View the Right Thing. On this episode, Wes and Steve start things off with the revolution of love with 1965's Doctor Zhivago.
She's in Uriatin.
Uriatin?
The private life is dead. For a man with any manhood.
Then things get out of control with the tale of youth run amok in Matt Dillon's screen debut in Over the Edge.
Uh-oh. That stuff I took. It was supposed to be speed, but I think it was acid or flash. Really?
And now, live from an undisclosed location in Greater Los Angeles, California, this is View the Right Thing.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of... He's smiling.
Indiana Jaws?
View the Right Thing.
Oh, yeah, we decided to change it for Labor Day.
You should have seen the grin on his face when I gestured for him to say the title of our show.
I'm pretty sure I said View the Right Thing just now, 4 seconds ago.
Roll that tape back.
Yeah, I heard it.
No.
I heard it.
I don't think that was right. So, it's been a couple weeks.
Has it?
It has. It's been... We've had a lot of activity over the last week or so.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of new Facebook likes.
Getting a lot of likes.
Listening to us and have not checked out the Facebook page, you can check out the No Lag Till Brooklyn Facebook page and give us a like. That'd be nice.
Getting some correspondence, people trying to tell us how to run our show. No, that's not really true.
I was going to say, did that happen?
No. If it did, I've forgotten about it, but I don't think it happened.
I don't think it happened.
But, we got H.W. Pantaloons and Fillery out there, and they like to be like, you should watch this, you should watch that. And we are going to watch a movie that Fillery suggested.
At some point, when it gets thrown out of the bucket.
That's right.
Pantaloons hasn't suggested movies for us to watch, have they?
If she has, it might have been in direct text form. She's got my private number. She's like my little sister, so she might just text me and be like...
Like your little sister or actually your sister?
She's unofficially my little sister.
Unofficially your little sister.
I was her big brother's best man.
So,
and I drove her to college most of the time.
No DNA connection.
I mean, we're both heavy Irish descent.
I mean, you're both human beings, so...
Both human beings. There's probably a DNA connection, but not parental or even grandparental.
Gotcha.
You get it.
I gotcha. So, in the last couple of weeks, have you seen any movies recently?
Yes.
What'd you see?
Last night, I went to see a movie called Blood-Sucking Bastards.
Oh, yeah. How was that?
It was very funny. I liked it a lot. I like movies that incorporate a lot of improvisation among the cast, and it felt like there was plenty of that.
Yeah.
But maybe they just wrote it in a way that's so very pointed right at exactly what I like. But it was very funny. It was very bloody.
Okay. Pretty gory.
It was pretty scary.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Yeah, some good thrills and chills and even a few spills. Some good spills.
Yeah. I heard some people howling outside. And
then also a couple days ago, when was this? It doesn't matter. I saw San Andreas.
Oh, yeah, the...
over at the $3 theater.
Earthquake film. What did you think of that earthquake film?
We're talking about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson versus an earthquake, ladies and gentlemen. Well, a series of earthquakes.
When I had Carla
Cugina or Cugina?
Okay.
Carla C.
I always think it's like Gigina, but I guess it's
Is it a
C.
G?
No, I have no idea.
I always feel like it's a C. Cugina.
It's the mom from Spy Kids.
The mom from Spy Kids, the female lead in Son-in-Law with Pauly Shore. Yeah. But, I mean, she's done so very much. I got to bump into her on the set of Entourage years ago.
Ooh, fancy.
Let me tell you something. If you think she's attractive on screen, in person, times 100, man.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, whoa, that's Carla Cugina, or possibly Cugina. So, the movie itself was certainly entertaining. I mean... it was a bit terrifying living in Los Angeles and the whole pretty much, 5 miles from the San Andreas Fault right here, I think. I think we're really close to a chunk, a good piece of the line. of the San Andreas Fault.
Yeah.
So that's terrifying. And so this movie, it was just earthquakes from like out in Nevada, and then they made a big curve all the way up to San Francisco, and they shook the heck out of everybody.
Yeah.
And it was scary.
Yeah.
But it was mostly just thrilling and funny and fun.
Yeah.
And not always funny on purpose.
Sure.
But it was a blast.
I like the British kid that was in it.
British kid was okay. He was little Rickon from Game of Thrones, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I meant the older British kid, but yeah,
The older British brother.
Both British kids were great in it.
I really liked Alexandra Daddario, but who didn't?
Is that the daughter?
Yeah, I believe so. And then you got, I thought Jan Griffith was well cast as, what was it, Philip, the stepdad?
Yeah.
I guess you could say. And then one thing that really irked me was the very beginning stunt when they with the helicopter rescue on the side of a cliff in the San Fernando Valley.
Yeah.
When they say we're going to have to tip the hat, and they basically take the helicopter under a big piece of overhanging rock. I don't know exactly what you'd call that.
Yeah. They just kind of like thread the needle through the crevice, but sideways.
Right, but then they hover
Right
underneath a rock. And I don't know if any helicopter pilot would ever think that that's safe to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Vamp a little.
It was crazy. I'll vamp all you want. So, let's give you just a taste of what we're about to talk about today on Indiana Jaws. All right, Wes is out of the room. I can say whatever I want. San Andreas, it's The Rock versus an earthquake. What else do you need? Blood-sucking bastards. Check for it in theaters near you. It's very funny. It's very bloody. It's a little scary.
You know what I liked about it?
It's very sexy. What?
I liked the underwater stuff.
Yeah, the underwater stuff was real cool. Man, that boat race, you know what I'm talking about. That was insane.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
I'm not going to say much about the boat race. My guess is, the movie's been out for a couple months now, so either you've seen it or you're not going to see it. But if you might see it, go see it.
Maybe waiting for HBO. That's perfect HBO fodder right there.
Yeah, really good. Just like, oh, look what's on, and just kind of leave it chill, go about your day, check in with it every few minutes.
Right.
Yeah. What about you? Have you been to see any movies recently?
Man, yeah, I feel like I have. I feel like I saw something recently, and I can't remember what it is. So I'll move to the one that I saw last night.
Yeah.
Saw a movie again.
Oh,
for the millionth time.
Right.
I went to the Hollywood Bowl
for Bring It On.
Not for Bring It On.
Oh.
Go Toros.
For Glitter. You saw Glitter with Mariah Carey?
No. It was my favorite movie of all time.
Oh, I know what that is.
Yep.
Should I say it?
Yeah, go for it.
That would be E.T., the extraterrestrial.
That is correct. Oh. And so they did, it was, this weekend was the world premiere weekend. I think they might be taking this on tour or something. I don't know.
Whoa.
But because they billed it as the world premiere weekend for this thing. So,
okay.
It was E.T. live in concert. So they played the movie on a bunch of screens.
Nice.
And they had the L.A. Philharmonic Orchestra play the entire score.
Wow.
The entire film. So it's really cool. It's interesting how much you notice sound effects when they've removed the recorded score from it.
Yeah.
Especially keys.
All right.
The character of Keys, you hear his keys jingle a lot more.
Huh.
With that recorded soundtrack out of it. It's really interesting.
Wild.
Yeah. Really great experience. I'm really happy that we did it.
Sounds pretty awesome.
My favorite movie. I definitely got teary-eyed.
Aww.
Every time I watch that movie.
It's a teary-eyed movie, man.
Yeah.
For sure.
And they did an intermission, which I wasn't sure that they would do one, but they did this like kind of really cool thing where spoilers for E.T.
It's 34 years old, folks.
when Elliot takes E.T. out to build the device.
Yeah.
And then he wakes up. It's at Halloween, and he wakes up and E.T.'s gone, and Elliot's sick, and so he goes home and tells Michael to go. Actually, I was going to tell you the intermission. I launched into a completely different story.
Oh,
I will get back to that in a second. So the intermission was them going out to Halloween.
Yes,
and they were going to go build this device, and they meet up with Gertie.
Right,
and Elliot puts E.T. in the bike. and they start going, and all of a sudden they like lose control.
Right.
E.T. actually has control, and they do the whole flying thing across the moon.
Yeah.
That whole like sequence of that amazing music was the build up, and then just like they crash land, and then it cuts to black.
Oh wow!
It was awesome. It was really, really great. It
That
was
is great.
The perfect way to like leave people wanting more.
Sure. That's cool that they took an intermission.
Yeah, when they came back, I think they kind of need to for the orchestra, but
I agree.
They came back from intermission, and they played a sequence of music with nothing on the screen. They actually did some shots of the orchestra playing. And it was like kind of that sort of slower, ominous kind of music from E.T.
I can't.
It's got some harps and some French horn. It's got some of the darker themes going on. You know that the FBI stuff.
It's letting you know Peter Coyote's on the way.
Yeah, and then it just like the music just turned into the scene that was happening, and it just like the movie came back. And,
that's so cool.
Yeah, it was really neat. But so I was talking about the scene where Elliot wakes up and finds E.T. missing.
Yes.
That actually was something I noticed. We saw the movie with, I don't know how many thousands of people were at the Hollywood Bowl.
Sure.
But that place was packed. And we were watching the movie. You could tell people who either had never seen the movie before.
Oh, yeah?
And people who hadn't seen the movie in a really long time.
Okay.
And the best moment for that was when Elliot gets sick. He can't find E.T. He goes home, and he tells Michael, you have to go find him. He's out there, and he's sick. And so Michael goes out, and he evades the FBI guys.
Right, on his BMX.
On his BMX. And then he finds E.T. in the ravine.
Right.
And the camera like cuts down into, like moves down. I can't remember if it moves down or if it cuts to it directly. But you see E.T. just like white.
Right.
And like sickly, kind of like laying in the river dying.
Yeah,
and
he looks all crusty.
Reaction from the audience, who clearly had either forgotten how that looks, or people that saw it for the first time. It was an amazing experience to just kind of feel that audible gasp from everyone.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, like, people next to us were crying, people in front of us were crying. It was just it's such an iconic film.
Yeah,
so relatable. And
I love E.T., man. I watched it last summer at one of those outdoor screenings.
Yeah.
And it felt like it might have been the first time I've really seen it in one sitting the whole way through, maybe since my family got it on VHS when I was about 7 years old.
Yeah. The comedy in that movie is so well timed, too.
Yeah, there's a lot of funny.
The whole scene where he's watching the movie and Elliot's at school freeing the frogs.
Yeah, but
he's watching The Quiet Man with John Wayne, and there's a scene where Elliot's like liberating all of the frogs, and The Quiet Man's going on, and there's this conversation between a man and a woman, and it's windy, and she's trying to leave, and he grabs her and pulls her back, and Elliot grabs the little girl and pulls her back.
Playboy playmate Erica Leniak.
She turned into a playmate when she
grew up to be, yeah.
Interesting.
And Baywatch star for a couple seasons.
Oh, all right.
I'm pretty sure. I could be totally wrong about this.
It's one of my favorite moments, that sequence.
I love it.
Yeah.
And the frogs get freed, which is nice. Keep talking, Wes. I'm looking something up real quick.
Yeah, no problem.
Should we? Yes.
Do you want to jump into?
I feel like we should.
We have a lot to talk about.
So very much.
We watched Doctor Zhivago, which was 3 hours and like 15 minutes.
3 hours and 15 minutes of Doctor Zhivago, starring Omar Sharif and Julie Christie and Rod Steiger, whom I did not recognize,
and Geraldine Chaplin, who I never
Geraldine
heard of
Chaplin.
Yeah, she was great in this. When she shows up in that pink outfit.
Oh yeah, that was adorable.
Yeah, it was
with
adorable.
the biggest, furriest pink fuzzy hat you could ever imagine in your life. I hope they never make a bigger, furrier, fuzzy pink hat than that.
Yeah,
that's what I'm laying down right now.
Fair enough. So we also watched Over the Edge.
Yeah,
we did all this. We're doing all this all in one day this time. which is rare for us.
Today is a View the Right Thing marathon day.
Yeah, so now we're recording, and we should jump into Doctor Zhivago.
Dr. Zhivago.
We're going to try something a little bit different this time.
Yes.
We are going to read the synopsis from Wikipedia.
Right.
And maybe add a couple things in that they might miss. We'll see.
Sure.
And then just our thoughts on it. But as far as the synopsis goes, we think it might be easier rather than us writing our own synopsis, which is what we normally do.
You do?
Well, I either write a synopsis or we kind of wing it.
Right.
So we're going to try using...
I'm going to wing Over the Edge because I've seen it. This might have been my 15th time in my whole life.
Whereas it was my first time.
Right.
And it was both of our first times for Doctor Zhivago.
For Zhivago, because it's so very long.
All right, so as Wikipedia says, the film takes place mostly against the backdrop of pre-World War I years, World War I itself, and the Russian Revolution of 1917, and the Russian Civil War.
Yes. Which went forever. Maybe not forever.
Yep.
But long enough to break Zhivago's heart.
So at the beginning of the film, we see this little kid is orphaned. It's actually this beautiful shot. So there's an overture, of course, because it's an older film. But then when it comes in, you see this amazingly beautiful shot of all of these people walking through the wilderness or a field with this massive mountain behind them. It's probably my favorite shot of the movie. There's another shot that I really liked of Lara later in the film that looked over her. But this one was amazing shot. You really get a feel for how insignificant and small we are as people with that gigantic mountain and these little tiny ants of people walking across this field. And they're walking to a cemetery.
Aww. And
this kid, Yuri Zhivago, his mother has died. And so he's now an orphan. And so... they put her in the ground. They nailed the coffin shut, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
They show a lot of her corpse, too.
Yeah, they show a bit of her corpse.
Her face.
Even after she's in the ground, the camera cuts to inside the coffin. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's going to come back to life and she's going to be buried alive.
I was worried, too.
She didn't.
I'm like, why are we looking at her in the coffin in this weird cutaway?
Yeah.
Maybe just to cement the fact that this poor woman's dead.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much only downhill from here.
Yeah. So these people take in Yuri.
Yes.
Zhivago. It's this man, his wife, and their daughter Tanya.
Yeah.
Do they ever explain why they're taking this kid in, or how they knew the family? I feel like they never really explained that.
If they said it quickly, or it might have happened while I was dozed off, because I dozed off
really
early in this movie. But my guess is maybe they were, neighbors, friends of the family, something like that. I mean, they seem to really just be like, we're taking you in, buddy.
Yeah.
And, you seem to know them well enough.
Right.
So that was nice.
Yeah.
And all he had left from his mom's will and testament was a triangular guitar-like instrument, the name of which I now forget.
Balalaika, is that it?
That sounds very close, so I'm going to say yes.
Okay. I'm sure it'll come up in our notes at some point.
And he has a beautiful red one of those, and the old man who's taking him in talks about how his mother used to be able to make it sing as if there were two guitars playing in the room.
And he asks him if he could play, and Yuri says, no, I can't. And he's like, I thought all people from this area could play this.
Right.
And the kid's like, well, where are you from? And he's like, I'm from Moscow. And you're going to come to Moscow, and you're going to live with us.
Right. And then
we go to Moscow.
He does, yes.
Yes. And you get a feel that Yuri is coming from this small village, very rural.
Oh, yeah.
Poor, quite possibly. And he goes... we basically flash forward to him as an adult. And he's finishing school.
Yes.
And he wants to be a doctor. Yes.
A poet.
And a poet. So he's a doctor by trade, but a poet by heart. And he's written poetry, but of course, the Russians won't let people read his poetry.
Right.
So later when he meets up with Tanya, I almost said sister, but that'd be kind of weird. They weren't exactly brother and sister.
They were not, as far as we know.
Yes. But they were sort of raised together.
Yes.
But we learned that in France they appreciate young Russian poets, and that he's published and well loved in France.
That is correct.
So we go to Moscow, and Tanya is coming back from Paris, and then we also meet Lara.
We do meet Lara, but we kind of met Lara because it occurs to me we jumped right over
I was
the beginning of the movie.
No, I was gonna.
That only just dawned on me.
I was
going
to jump back a little bit.
Okay, perfect.
To Lara and her mother. That's what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the fact that the movie actually starts...
Oh, yeah, you're right. So it's actually a story being told.
Yes, it actually starts in, what do you think, maybe the 50s-ish or something?
Yeah, somewhere in that
and it starts with this man who claims to be Doctor Zhivago's brother.
I can't believe we skipped over that.
Well, it's wild. That's kind of amazing that happened.
Yeah.
Because that's how long the movie is.
It's important. It's important, but it's something that you don't see very often. You don't talk to these characters or see these characters very much.
No, although he is narrating a lot.
He is.
And
so you have Alec Guinness,
cool degree. Yes,
playing
Sir Alec Guinness, if I'm not mistaken,
Zhivago's brother, long lost brother,
and he's
overseeing some type of labor camp. It seems like.
Yeah, and they seem to be at a dam, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they don't really show the dam until later in the film. You just see all these people walking in, and you see lots of rocks and kind of mountainous stuff.
Right.
And they talk about you're bringing more people in to move rocks, and it would be easier if we could get excavators to do this.
Right.
And we would be done ahead of schedule if we had excavators. But so he has this girl brought up.
Yes.
And her name is Tanya.
Tanya
Karamovsky. And he starts asking the brother, played by Alec Guinness, who's maybe my favorite actor in the film, starts asking the girl all these questions about what did your father look like, what did your mother look like, what did they call her, and on and on. And she tells him that she doesn't really remember her father, and that she remembers her mother as being big. She was little, so her mother was big.
Yes.
And she doesn't remember what people called her.
Right.
She just remembers her name as Mommy. And
I should point out it was Komarovsky, not Karamovsky. I mixed up my R and my M.
Okay. I'm sure this is going to happen. There's a lot of names that we're probably going to butcher throughout this whole thing.
Quite possibly. So
the girl... Alec Guinness's character is trying to essentially find out if this girl is his niece.
Right. Dr. Zhivago's long-lost daughter.
And the girl, of course, is very reluctant to believe that idea.
Yeah. I almost think she's just terrified to have to be talking to a general of the new communist Red Army, I guess?
Yeah.
Well, after a shift at work, you don't want to talk to that guy.
So he goes on and tells the story.
Yes.
About Yuri and Lara, essentially, and Tanya, and so on.
And it takes...
he also references... Yeah, it takes a while. He also shows this book of poetry, which I think it was the 40s.
Okay.
The mid-40s. I feel like they made a reference to the fact that they're just now allowing people to read this book.
Yeah, true.
And I feel like the 40s were mentioned, which is interesting because this film wasn't allowed to be shown in Russia until the 90s.
Wow.
So I thought there was kind of an interesting parallel where in the movie there's this book of poetry about this woman that people weren't allowed to read for decades, and then the same kind of thing happened with this movie.
Right.
So
pretty cool.
He's telling this story, and he also tells the story of Lara. And Lara has a crossing with Yuri without them even knowing it. They end up riding the same train car, which the train car and they're passing without knowing sort of comes back full circle later on. But he continues on to his home after school.
Yes.
And she gets off the train and finds her friend Pavel.
Yeah.
Who is handing out these flyers asking people to come to a peaceful protest of...
Pavel?
I believe his name was...
I thought it was
I'm
Pasha.
sorry, Pasha. I'm sorry.
Because then there's a Sasha.
I knew a Pavel
too.
once. We're gonna blow this podcast just
all right. Pasha.
up. I'm sorry. Pasha.
Pasha's a revolutionary,
yes.
but not a Bolshevik, because he says the Bolsheviks, what is it? They don't believe in good or bad, something like, no, they don't believe in right or wrong. I forget.
Yeah, he's a reformer.
Yeah.
He's pushing for reform. And so he's handing out these things, and of course the police show up and they're like, you can't do this, give me your papers, and they make him leave. And,
yeah.
And Lara sort of shows up and is like, oh, it's my brother, blah, 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 blah. Don't, forgive him, I'll take him home.
Right.
And so they leave, and Pasha's like, why did you call me your brother? And
oh, yes, why not your fiancé?
That's the easiest thing. And he's like, why not your fiancé? And she was just kind of like, ah, ha, ha, that's so silly. So, obviously, Pasha has feelings for Lara.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody has feelings for Lara in this movie.
Everybody does, and it's kind of ridiculous. She's like a siren out on a rock somewhere, and all these men just keep crashing their boats into those rocks.
Mm-hmm. So Lara goes home, and we learn that she lives with her mother, who owns a dress shop.
Yes.
And has all these women making dresses and stuff. And when Lara comes in, she sees Komarovsky.
Komarovsky, played by Rod Steiger.
He's just kind of like lounging in their apartment in the back of the store. And clearly he is a suitor for her mother.
Right.
So they have a relationship. And one evening, she goes to, I think later that evening even, she goes to escort him out. Lara does.
Yes.
And she's been studying. And as she goes to escort him out, he sort of starts making eyes at her and puts like a little like lace thing over her head.
Yeah.
And you can clearly he's moving in on her.
Yeah.
But it's a little unclear whether she's into it or not at that time.
Right.
I felt like she seemed really uncomfortable, but also amused by it.
Creepy old Komarovsky.
So then comes the night where the protest is supposed to happen.
Yes.
And Komarovsky is supposed to take Lara's mother out to dinner and dancing to some big affair.
Right.
And it's sort of implied that he knows something's going to happen because of this protest. He's like, I want to hurry up because I want to avoid such and such street.
Yeah.
Well, Lara's mother is sick, so she insists that he take Lara. I think Lara was going to go with him initially anyways. So she's like, still go out, and Lara's like, no, you don't need to do that. And he ends up taking her anyways.
Boy, does he.
And so, so they go out, and they have sort of some awkward conversation, and he gives her a little bit of wine, even though she's only 17.
He gives her quite a bit of wine.
Well, he starts her off, fairly small.
All right.
And then
they dance a little.
They dance and spin around the floor, and she becomes kind of taken in by him, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
And they have a grand old time. Meanwhile, Pasha is out marching peacefully with a lot of people in the streets.
They've got like a band going,
Mm-hmm.
like a brass band and drum and
drums,
what have you.
And Zhivago goes out on his balcony and kind of observes this peaceful protest, and then goes back in.
Right.
His sort of stepmother, the woman that took him in, comes out to look at everything with him, and it's sort of referenced that maybe she's a little ill, so she shouldn't be out there because she's freezing immediately. So they usher her back in.
That's true.
So Komarovsky,
the jerk,
takes Lara home.
No.
No.
First,
I apologize.
while they're all having dinner in their big, rich, fancy thing, Zhivago's essentially, foster mother, she's reading the banners of the parade as they go by, and it's like liberty, freedom, brotherhood, bread, right? She's like, oh, isn't that sweet? Like, those sound like great things. And then as Komarovsky and all of them are having their dinner, all of the protesters basically gather
outside.
like right under the windows of this restaurant where essentially the ruling aristocrat class is all dining, and they sing this beautiful song, and then the entire restaurant is silent, and they're listening, and they're all looking toward the window, and then like shortly towards the end of the song, Komorowski says, maybe they'll sing in tune after the revolution. Like, just...
Yeah. Dismissive.
And, man, that pissed me off.
And now, of course, the whole restaurant laughs and giggles.
Right.
So, the protest does move on.
Yes.
And Komorowski takes Lara home in a sleigh, and as they're driving home, police or soldiers seem to come out of...
dragoons, as they call them.
Yeah, dragoons. Come out of a gated area. They got horses and whatnot. Clearly, something's up.
Yeah.
And while they're going home, Komorowski decides to make his move on Lara, and he puts his tongue in her mouth.
He sure does. They're Russian people, but they French kiss.
Yes, and I read that for the kiss, and she looks a little shocked at first. And then they start going at each other. That for that kiss, Rod Steiger actually did put his tongue in her mouth.
Oh boy!
And so her reaction was a real reaction because that wasn't really planned.
There you have it.
There's also a slap later on in the movie where she slaps him and he slaps her back.
That's right.
And that was also not planned.
I believe that. So, she looked very shocked by that one.
And so we're veering off of Wikipedia a little bit here because there's not much here in this Wikipedia thing.
Okay.
So I apologize if we're jumping all over the place.
It happens.
So
Komorowski has put the moves on Lara,
and then takes her home. And
do they shag, you think?
No, I don't think so.
Because her mom's home.
Yeah,
I know. So, but maybe they got it on in the carriage.
I don't think so. I think they made out in the carriage, and that was it.
All right, but
I'm
the
not
dragoons.
Sure, I'm not sure they ever get to that point till much later at Christmas time.
Oh,
I think that's the first time that happens.
Okay,
for what it's worth. But
the dragoons ride their horses on the protesters with their sabers out.
Just
beat up a lot of people.
Beat them up.
Probably killed a couple people.
We don't initially see what happens to Pasha.
Right.
We do see that he picks up a gun.
That's right. Yes.
Off the ground, and then he sort of is disappeared into the fray.
Yes.
And a lot of the action, what you're seeing, you're not actually seeing people getting hurt. You're seeing Zhivago coming back out on his balcony and witnessing the whole thing, and you're seeing sort of his face and his reaction, and then the man who took him in, sort of his father, who's actually the professor of the school.
Yes,
he comes out also, and so Zhivago goes down to try and tend to the wounded, and he's like bandaging some people up, and bodies are being thrown into a cart, and the police come and they say, "Get back inside." And Zhivago kind of gives him a little bit of guff, but he's like, the police officer's like, "I'll have you arrested if you don't go back inside." And so the professor comes and gets him and takes him back in.
Poor Zhivago had to see all that with his beautiful poet eyes.
Yeah. So then Pasha goes to visit Lara, and he's bruised and got this huge gash down the side of his face.
Yeah, it's gross.
And she lets him in, and he pours iodine on his face, just straight out of the bottle, just pours it on his head.
Yeah.
And then he gives her the gun and says, "Will you hide this for me? I need you to hide this for me." And she does, because her mother comes out too, and so she stashes it really quickly.
Yes.
And the mother's like, "Oh, are you going to be going out?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm going to go to church."
Right.
Which they don't ever show Lara go to church. The next time we see Lara, the next scene, she is at a dinner or theater or something.
Some kind of weird, almost motel room kind of thing with Komorowski. They're in like a private room.
Yeah. Which
and she's wearing a dress.
That's where they're going to do it. But
yeah.
I'm not 100% sure.
I'm pretty sure that's when they start
going on there?
doing the sex to each other.
Yeah.
Because, she's wearing a dress that she says he picked out, and then...
It's a very, like...
It's a bright red
dress. Kind of sexy, low cleavage kind of dress.
Yeah.
Especially for that time period.
Something you'd see in, like, a Western saloon, not in a Russian, frozen street Moscow.
Right. And she gets all huffy with him at some point.
Right.
He kind of is a little rough with her, not physically so much, but verbally rough with her. And so she's like, "I'm out of here." And is this when he calls her a slut? I can't remember.
I feel like it is.
Yeah. So he calls her a slut, and she's like, basically like, "I don't have to take this." And he's like, "You'll come back. They always come back." And she goes to put her shawl on, and he goes up to her and from behind and like holds her.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Baby, stay," and she does.
She does. He's basically got full-on control of this poor young girl.
And then the next thing we see is somebody writhing in a bed and
Right.
moans, and you were like, "Close your eyes, Wes."
Yeah.
But that's not at all what was happening.
No.
It was a nice misdirection.
Yes, absolutely. Because then we see through a window somebody still writhing in a bed, but then Komarovsky is fully clothed, moving around in that room.
And he's worried.
And it's like, well, what the heck is he doing?
And he writes on a piece of paper, puts it in an envelope, seals it, takes it down to, there's like a cab guy.
His carriage man, I think.
And he's like, "Go to this house, get the professor, bring him back immediately." So the guy goes, and there's a recital going on at the professor's house.
Right.
And Tanya and
Zhivago,
Yuri are there, and they're sitting on the stairs, and they're both a little bit bored, and you get the feeling that they're kind of making eyes at each other.
Oh, sure.
And there's definitely reference that they have feelings for each other.
I thought it was so cute the way they were sitting on the stairs together as opposed to in a regular chair.
Yeah.
It was like they snuck just a little bit away.
It was like they were still the kids
of
the household, but even though they were in their fancy outfits.
Right.
So the professor comes out, and there's sort of some veiled references to the fact that she has feelings for him.
Yes.
About, would you want to be with a doctor who does general practice? And she says, is he a poet? And he's like, "No, surely not." And she's like, "Well, then no." So clearly she's saying that she wants to be with Yuri. There's a ring at the door, and pardon me.
Careful.
Tanya goes.
Drink your iced tea.
Yeah, thank you. Tanya goes to answer the door.
Yeah.
And it's the note, and the professor says, "Yuri, come with me. It's time for you to do some general practicing."
Right.
So they go.
They get out of there so fast. They go back to what is essentially Lara's mother's dress shop / home.
Correct.
And they find that writhing on the bed was...
Well, you don't see even... They do a whole bunch of stuff. They bring out like a tube.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
They say, "What did she take?" And they show this empty blue bottle.
Which looked, oddly enough, like the bottle of
the
iodine that Pasha had poured on his face. Did people try to commit suicide by drinking iodine? Was that a thing?
I don't know. Let us know, Viewsters.
Tweet at us, Stephen Nohowood or Movie Hippo, and let us know if iodine suicide was ever a thing.
So you don't really know who it is.
Right.
Rather around the bed. You actually almost maybe think it's Lara.
Yeah.
Because, when they were arguing, I guess this was something to think about. He makes a reference to, like, maybe you should just go home and tell your mother what's really going on. And obviously Lara doesn't feel good about that. So you kind of think that maybe this is Lara. And so they do a bunch of work on this person, and then they send Komarovsky out to get water, and Yuri's like, "Is she going to be okay?" And he's like, "Yes, she's going to recover. She'll be fine." And then he pulls the sheet away, and they reveal that it's the mother.
Yeah.
And
she's
not
dressed.
And she's not dressed. So the professor tells Yuri to go find the girl, Lara, and tell her that that the mother's going to be okay, that she's going to live, and that she shouldn't worry so much. So he goes around the dress shop, and he's looking for her, and he sees her through a window. He sees just her hand. It's real dark in the room.
Yeah.
And then a light comes in the room, and it's Komarovsky coming into the room, and you don't hear it, but he's telling her that the mother's going to be fine.
Right.
And she's so grateful. But she starts kissing him all over his face and his hands, and Komarovsky's like kind of pushing her away, and she sits back down and sort of cries herself back to sleep.
Yeah.
And Komarovsky, as he's leaving the room with his light, sees Yuri and knows that Yuri knows what's going on between him and this young girl. Sorry, I'm just checking the notes now.
It's all right. I'm having a hard time figuring out exactly what happens next because so many things happen.
Yeah. So Lara meets with Komarovsky to tell him that she's going to get married to someone else.
Yeah.
She's going to go and settle down. And she decides she's going to settle down with Pasha.
With Pasha, the revolutionary.
And, they have this kind of contentious conversation about whether Pasha being a teacher out in the middle of nowhere would be good for Lara and,
any of their offspring?
Money and,
yeah.
And, so anyways, Pasha's, cranky about it. But they're intent to marry.
This is where Komarovsky
goes. So this is right around Christmas.
Well, this is where, he says to her this whole thing about how, there's two types of women in the world. He's like, there's two types of men in the world, basically. Men like your Pasha there, and essentially men like Komarovsky himself.
Yep.
And then he says, and there's two types of women in the world. I don't even remember if he really...
He says, you're not the first... We both know you're not the first one.
Right. And then he's like, what you are, Lara, is a slut.
That's when he says it, yes.
And I think that's when she slaps him.
And then he slaps her back.
He slaps her back, and then he just wrestles her and starts putting the moves on her.
And he's like...
And he's
like, let's find out.
Yeah, and it's pretty terrible.
That's what kind of made me think that they hadn't had sex yet, because he says, let's find out. Essentially, like, I'm going to force myself on you, and if you decide you're going to enjoy this and go with it, then we'll know what you really
are.
So
this is one of the most romantic movies ever made, according to everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
So here you go. So he forces himself on her, and sure enough, poor Lara, she only puts up a little bit of resistance, and then she gives in.
But when it's done, and you don't see the act, you see him get up, and she's there all sweaty. You can tell she's disgusted.
Yeah,
she didn't want to be a part of it. It's not like she gave in and enjoyed it.
No, but
I just wanted to make that clarification.
But it's sort of like, in a way, she did sadly prove his point about her.
Right.
She lived up to his horribly low expectations of her.
So she goes and grabs the gun after Komarovsky leaves.
Yes, the gun that she's been hiding for Pasha.
Yeah. And she goes to Komarovsky's house, and the butler's like, oh, he's at such and such party.
Don't tell him I told you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Poor Jeeves there.
So she leaves, and she starts heading towards the party, and she runs into Pasha, and Pasha's like, we have plans. Where are you going? And she says, I left everything in the note. He's like, what do you mean the note? She's like, I explain absolutely everything in the note. And so she leaves him standing there, and then he's kind of like, what's going on? So he eventually follows her around the corner and sees that she had gone into this big party.
Yes.
And she goes into the party, and Komarovsky's off playing poker.
Right.
Meanwhile, Yuri and Tanya are there, and they announce that he's graduated, and he's going to be a doctor, and that he is betrothed to Mary. And as they gesture to Tanya, you get a loud gunshot. And we come to see that Lara has shot Komarovsky, but shot him like in the hand.
The forearm or something. Yeah.
And they're all these men are there, and they're like holding her and wrestling the gun away and stuff. And they're like, call the police, and Komarovsky's like, no police. And Pasha comes in. And man, the crowd, he like parts the Red Sea. He walks in with such confidence. Everybody moves, and I think that's the first hint that there's something more and something greater about Pasha than we have come to understand.
Right, whether it's terrifying or heroic,
yeah,
we might not know.
So he goes and he gets Lara and takes her out of there, and he goes home with her, and he reads the letter, and he's crushed.
I might have been asleep at this part.
Oh yeah,
sorry.
You see it through the window, and it's very clear that like what's in the letter has destroyed him. And
wait, is this the scene where it starts with the window all foggy, and there's just a little bit of candlelight, and then as we get closer to the window, the heat from the candlelight is defrosting the window? Is that scene, or was that earlier in the movie?
It might be that scene, because then you see Yuri ride by in a sleigh with Tanya, and he looks up and sees it.
Whoa, okay.
So yes.
I think you're right.
So Pasha is devastated, and it's clear that what was in the note was when she said she told him everything that happened, everything, the fact that Komarovsky was there and that he raped her and all this stuff is in there.
Oh, man.
Oh man, even the description of this movie is making you fall asleep.
It's true. We're 20 minutes into the movie, folks.
So Zhivago deals with Komarovsky. I guess I skipped over that part.
Yeah, he tends to his bullet wound.
Yeah, he's like, "Can I trust your professional discretion?" And he's like, "Of course you can, even though you're kind of a scumbag."
A total scumbag.
And there's a reference that Komarovsky was friends with Yuri's father.
Yes.
And when Yuri's father died, there was a will.
Yeah.
And Komarovsky essentially got everything.
Yeah.
And left Yuri and his mother destitute.
Right.
So,
but wrong.
Pasha marries Lara, and they go off and have a daughter named Katya, and they live out in this kind of remote region, not near Moscow.
Right. No, I can't remember the name of that town. They said it 1,000 times.
No,
in the last hour
I think
of the
you're
movie.
thinking of Gramenko, but I think that's later.
Maybe. Okay.
So now we kind of flash forward, and Tanya has a baby as well, and World War I happens, and Zhivago is sent by the Labor Party to... Oh, I'm sorry, not the Zhivago we know. Yuri's brother, who's telling this story, Alec Guinness's character, is sent by the Labor Party to register with the Imperial Russian Army,
right,
for the Bolsheviks, to sort of subvert their cause. I'm going to give them... He's like a double agent.
Right. And what a double agent.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Zhivago is a medic.
He's a medic in the army. Now, Pasha fights also for the army against German forces that are trying to invade.
Right.
And he goes out and he's seen as a leader, a real leader.
Absolutely.
They talk about the men who can't lead, and so the men just yawn in the trenches.
Yeah.
And then the men who can lead and what these men will do for them. And they go running into battle, and there's an explosion, and then all of a sudden you see Pasha's glasses land on the ground.
Right.
And all these men dying all around him.
All the men dying.
So Lara, not knowing what happens to her husband, leaves her child to be cared for by someone else and enlists as a nurse so she can try to find her husband. And she ends up being drafted by Zhivago through some circumstances, some sort of like cross meetings with each other. They're leaving. Lara's camp is leaving, and they encounter maybe the Labor Party's troops coming toward them. It's not really clear who. They don't ever say who the troops are.
Yeah.
But they're essentially troops who don't see eye to eye with the people.
Yeah, basically a bunch of Russian deserters who are going home to...
Because they don't have a leader anymore.
Right, they're going home to participate in the Russian Revolution and say, forget about this war with Germany, we got to fix things back here.
Yeah.
They're going home, they encounter a group of Russian military, and they're just like, come on, boys, like, just turn around, come with us, turn around, you know, and they just keep on marching and marching, and there's kind of two leaders of this Russian military group. There's kind of this, chubby older man who probably has no business leading soldiers, and then there's a younger man, and all these other revolutionaries are like, come on, boys, turn around, come with us, turn around. And then all of a sudden, like, one of the leaders of the Russian military, the kind of younger guy, just sort of stops and says, we're turning around. And, like, they all take their hats off, and they're all like, yay, we're all on the same side, we're all going to go home to fix Russia and say F this war, because this is Russia's rich versus Germany's rich, and we're being, us poor pawns are being forced to kill their poor pawns for their nonsense. But then another Russian military leader the kind of younger dude.
Gets up on a barrel.
Yeah, he gets up on a barrel and starts saying, starts rallying against the revolution. And then something happens. He falls into the barrel, and then they shoot him.
Yeah, and he seems like he's actually doing a good job. He seems like maybe he's going to rally the troops, most of them, back.
Oh, yeah.
When he slips and falls into the barrel of water. And then one of the deserters grabs a gun and
just takes him out, and he sinks dead into the barrel full of water.
And then it's a fight. It's a nasty fight.
Yeah, well, they go and they grab the older Russian leader down from his horse, and they just club him to death with their guns. And then you see somebody pull his hat up and wave it at the crowd, and it's like, let's do this. And they head back to revolt in Russia.
Except for some people, including Zhivago, who's
there. He's a medic.
Who starts tending to the wounded, and he gets Lara to help him.
Yeah.
Reluctant Lara.
So isn't that right there where that's
where they meet.
Re-met?
Yeah, that's where they meet.
Yeah.
And so...
Oh, I bumped my mic.
So they end up being redeployed to a little area, and Yuri is told, you're the head of this hospital now. And
yeah.
It's like dozens of soldiers, and he's like, I can't do this. And they're like, you got to try. That's your order. Those are your orders.
Right.
And so it's him and Lara against the world, essentially.
Yeah, just caring for everybody. I'm sure Lara's in charge of all the laundry and whatnot.
Yeah, for months and months.
Months. And months.
And I think it must go on more than a year because at some point, Tanya, back at home in Moscow, gets a letter where he's talking about what they're doing and how great and helpful Lara is, and he asks about his stepmother, the woman that took them in.
Yeah, Tanya's mom.
And Tanya goes, he must not have gotten the letter, and he was like, that was the professor says that was 8 months ago.
Yeah, he's kind of cracking jokes about how his wife's been dead all this time now.
Yeah,
so it's been a while.
Yeah. And Pasha's getting older and whatnot.
Sasha.
Dang,
as if that's
names.
Not confusing enough.
Sasha, Pasha. Oh, man. So, eventually, the war is over.
Yes.
And Yuri has gotten very close with Lara.
Okay, yes, that's where I wanted to get to.
And he sort of expresses that he loves her, and he moves in to get close. And she says to him, you're going back to Tanya, and I don't want you to have to lie about me.
Right.
To her.
That's a beautiful
it's the
sentiment right there.
The best moment for Lara in the whole movie,
yeah.
I think. I don't want you to do something you'd have to lie about. So Yuri returns home.
Mm-hmm.
And when he gets there, he finds the home that they lived in, which is this beautiful... not a mansion per se, but it's like
a city version of a mansion.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's completely in disarray, and there are 13 families living in it.
Yeah,
and it's been taken over by the government, and they have somebody there, two really stern people, this man and this woman, sort of overseeing the whole thing,
right,
and sort of testing loyalties, and
basically very early generations of the KGB, I guess you could say.
Sure.
Because they are literally just we're here to watch you foul up, and then when you foul up, we're going to have you sent to a camp somewhere.
Yeah, so they've turned these really beautiful homes into tenements, essentially. Yeah. So he's reassigned to work at the hospital.
Yeah.
And there's bouts of typhus.
Right.
They say, but of course they're not allowed to say it.
Right.
And then people are starving everywhere and having a hard time keeping the stoves lit. And there's a really interesting moment, where he gets called back to the house from work to check on a person, and they're worried. Of course, it's typhus.
Right.
And he's like, "Don't worry, it's not typhus. It's this other thing this other epidemic in our country. He starved to death."
Yeah.
So he goes upstairs to his apartment where Tanya, the professor, and Sasha are.
Sasha the baby.
And it's cold in there, and the stove's not lit. And he's like, no wonder the kid's losing weight. It's freezing in here. And he's kind of getting on Tanya, and she goes off behind a curtain to cry.
Aww.
And the professor informs him, she's doing the best she can. She turns the stove off after you leave and turns it on just before you come home so it's warm.
Yeah.
And then he goes to confront her and she says, we don't have enough fuel. So Yuri goes outside to
steal
wood from a fence barricade.
Finds a broken ass fence, steals the wood from it.
And there's a military man who sees him do it.
Uh-oh.
But we find out it is his brother who doesn't know. And the brother follows Yuri back, and Yuri's hiding the wood in his coat. And when Yuri gets in, he sees people leaving his apartment with all of their belongings.
Right. They're just taking all sorts of fancy stuff, whatever they want.
Yeah. And so he goes up, and the mean people tell him that, it's being reallocated, and you're going to have to share your apartment with more people.
Right.
And so they're reallocating we're putting your things in storage. And he says, this isn't storage, this is stealing. And then somebody tries to take the balalaika. And he snatches that away and, of course, drops all the wood that's in his coat. And now he's really in trouble because they're like, where'd you get this? And he's like, from a fence. And they're like, you can't do that. So it looks like it's going to hit the fan. When his brother walks in to the room, and all he does is snap his fingers, and everybody leaves the room.
Yeah, they know that this is a dude who could
high up.
He could have them all shot within 10 minutes if he wanted to.
Right.
Get some of those Stalinist purgers to come on over and thin out the herd.
So he explains to Yuri who he is, and they like hug and kiss each other on the cheek and do that whole thing, and he's really happy to see his brother, and he his brother tells him that the government doesn't appreciate his poetry,
right,
and that it's looked it's been condemned by the Soviet censors.
Yeah.
What you gasped just now.
We gotta step on the gas a little. It's already 5:36.
Yeah.
There's so much of this movie.
I know. And so he says, "Here's what I'm gonna do: He lies to him too. He says, "I don't like it either."
Yeah, that was a really cool moment
to get him to agree to leave with his family. So he gives him these papers to get them on a train, to get them to, I think it's called Gramenko, which is out in the middle of nowhere, and it's where the professor has a house.
Yes, owns a house out there,
and it's not too far from another village area.
Yeah,
but we'll
something
get to that
with
in a minute.
T, I think.
So they are on this train and they're heading out, and it stops for a period of time.
Yeah.
Overnight. And he gets out to take a walk into the woods, and he gets confronted by some military people who drag him back. And they drag him to an armored train, and they're like, take him to Strelnikov. And he gets brought into Strelnikov's office, and we find out it is
Pasha.
Pasha has changed his name to Strelnikov, and he's now leading this Soviet resistance.
Yeah, he's essentially like, is he a general?
He's a Bolshevik. He's a commander. They refer to him as a commander.
All right.
But he's like the leader of the Bolsheviks.
Yeah, he's up there. Still got that scar from the Dragoon.
Strelnikov tells Yuri that he knows where Lara is. He's like, your wife and child miss you. They need you. And he's like, I know where my wife is. She's in this town. It's like you're a 10.
That sounds. Oh gosh, I can never remember it. I feel like they said it 1,000 times. Yuriatin sounds right.
I think it's right. So, but there's anti-communist people out there called the White Party.
Yes.
Or the White Army. This is the Red Army and the White Army.
Yeah, they want to put the Tsar back in charge.
And they're, like, destroying the villages around them. They're burning things down.
Yep.
So anyways, they release Yuri. He gets back on his train, and they get to where they're going, and Tanya's like, this is beautiful, this is amazing. And this guy that the professor used to know shows up. I'm trying to speed it up a little bit.
Sure.
And he picks them up, and they're on their way to the professor's home.
Really beautiful place.
They see all the smoke from the distance, and he's like... that's Yuriatin.
Yeah.
They're burning Yuriatin.
Yikes. What happens when they get to the nice, beautiful place with the pretty onion domes?
With the onion domes, they find that it has been sort of condemned or boarded up.
Yeah, like seized for the people.
Yeah, by I guess that'd be the White Army that seized that, right?
No, I think the Red Army would have done it.
The Red Army did.
If it's for the people, I'm thinking.
I got really confused with the different factions.
Sure.
To be just completely honest. So there's a cottage that wasn't boarded up next to it, and so they decide to live there. They get some seed material, and they essentially start raising a farm and raising Sasha. And then they find out that the Tsar has been gunned down, and killed. You gasped again. Go for it.
Well, he was dead. That's all.
Oh, okay. So they're living, but they're actually living a pretty peaceful life away from everything,
right?
And Tanya gets pregnant, and she's like, "You need to get out of this house.
Yeah,
you need to go take a walk, go to Yuriatin. I hear they have a library. If it's still there, you should go check it out."
Yeah.
So eventually, he does go to Yuriatin, and when he gets there to the library, who's there?
Ooh, if I had to guess, I would say Lara.
Yeah. Lara's there. They start walking all over the town and looking at things, and they end up back at her apartment, and he's like, "Where's your kid?" And she's like, "At school." And then they just start their furious make-out session.
Years in the making. Yeah. I think at this point in the movie, winter had come and gone 40 times.
Yeah, and they definitely do it. They definitely show them in bed. And then eventually Yuri, it's getting close to Tanya to have the baby. And I think Yuri starts to have these feelings of guilt.
Yes.
So he's like, I'm going to go into Yuriatin and try and find some morphine. She's like, I don't need morphine. He's like, you might. So really what he's doing is he goes into town to break up with Lara.
Yes.
And, he knows where the secret key is and all this stuff. And he goes in and he breaks it off with her, and of course she cries and stuff, but I think she understands. And when he is on his way back on his horse, the army shows up and they grab him.
Yeah, the Red Army.
The Red Army grabs him. And they say, "We're enlisting you. We shoot deserters."
Right.
So he can't leave. So for 2 years, Zhivago works with the army and can't really communicate with his family at all, and they're gunning down White Army people, including children, teens that are just like learning how to be soldiers or whatever. And eventually, in the middle of the snow, he just stops. He does when the army is like confronted with some people. Then they move. What is it?
They bump into probably a dozen just women and children just staggering through the snow.
And they're just like, the soldiers. And they're like, what soldiers? The white soldiers? And she's like, the soldiers. That's all she says.
And she just points them in one direction. And so they all wander off.
And Yuri just doesn't move his horse.
Yeah, and he just kind of stays toward the back, and they just keep on going because everybody's just dog-tired and freezing cold. Yeah. And he's just like, I could just go this way. And he just turns.
So he turns around.
And nobody follows him.
And he ends up on foot. We assume his horse dies in the snow at some point. And he's trudging through the snow, and he sees what we think he's getting close to home.
He sees
two people with a small child, and he's like, Tanya, Tanya, and he's running after him, and of course it's not Tanya.
Why would it be?
He eventually gets to Yuriatin, and it's like, they're like, everybody has left the city. There's no one left in the city anymore. He's
got a bunch of boogersuckles in his mustache, and it's so gross looking.
So he goes to Lara's house. He finds the key. He goes, and with the key is a note, and she's basically like, I've left, but I'll come back. I left food. It's behind this thing, so the rats can't get to it.
Yeah.
And so he goes up, and it's like the only nice thing in this town anymore is this little apartment.
The only place where there might be some heat.
Yep. So he starts living there and trying to recuperate, and he finds out that Tanya and
Sasha
have left and the professor have left the cottage, so they're not there. So he just stays, and he sort of starts to make a life with Lara, and then when he's like starting to feel a little bit better, she's like, "This letter came for you 6 months ago."
Wow.
And he opens it up, and it's from Tanya. And it turns out that Tanya had come to Yuriatin to look for him
Right.
and had met Lara, and they know about each other.
Yeah.
So Tanya knows what's up. So anyways, Tanya sent this thing and says, this is where I'm sending this letter here because I think this is where you'll go first. We are leaving for Paris. We're with some Paris immigration, like an outfit.
You're right.
Criminals, essentially, but they're going to help us sneak us out of Russia and get us into Paris. And that's where we're going. You have a little girl.
Right, she had the second baby.
Yeah, because it's been 2 years. And so he just decides to just stay with Lara.
Yeah.
I was kind of flabbergasted by that. Eventually, they leave the apartment. Oh, Komarovsky shows up. That's what
Boy,
happens.
does he.
So Komarovsky shows up, and he lets them know that the I think they're called the Cheka. They're like, or Cheka. They're the sort of KGB, precursor to the KGB, I think.
Sounds right.
And that...
well, we should point out, he doesn't show up so much as he staggers in from the cold one night.
And just comes in.
Almost miraculously alive at all. And just comes in and plops down, and he's got a bottle of vodka, and he says, like, here's what's up. Play my game or you're dead.
He's like, Strelnikov's dead.
Strelnikov is dead, that's right.
So Strelnikov's been killed. And what they were doing was they never moved against Lara, even though they knew that Lara was his wife.
Right.
Because they figured she's bait. So she will draw him back. And Yuri's like, he doesn't even care about her. He never would have come back here. And Komarovsky's like, no, actually, they got him only 5 miles from here, and he insisted his name was Pasha Antonov.
His real last
name.
Yeah.
And he was coming back here. And so he's like, so that was the only thing keeping them from killing Lara.
Yeah.
Because she's associated with him. They're going to come for Lara and Katya. I'm going to give you passage out of here, and we're going to head out toward the coast, and where you go from there is your call.
But they were heading toward the Pacific coast, so basically through Mongolia and China and all that.
Yes.
Yeah, that seems like an odd choice, but what can you do?
So they tell him to F off.
Right.
And they literally throw him out, and the guy stumbles down the stairs, falls down the stairs and stuff, and back out into the cold. And he's like, you're going to regret this. So Yuri moves them back towards the cottage, but they can't stay in the cottage. That'd be super weird. So they pull down the boards off of the house, the big house with
big
the
mansion
domes, and they move into the office. And the reason they move into the office is the windows and part of the roof is gone, and so it's just snow and ice in there, and it's kind of beautiful. It's this like ice palace, with chandeliers and stuff.
It's very uncomfortably pretty.
But the one room that that wasn't affected by the snow so much is the office, and so they set up a little home in the office with Katya. And there's this beautiful desk, this beautiful like leather and wooden desk, and he tells Lara that Tanya had told him a long time ago to write at this desk because he's a poet and he doesn't do poetry anymore.
Ain't that the truth?
So he does begin writing, and he writes this book. It's the Lara poems, and
they're beautiful.
And they're beautiful, and everybody ends up loving them. But eventually, Komarovsky shows up
again,
but with men, with soldiers with him at his side.
Yeah,
and he's like, "Give me a minute. Here's the deal. I'm getting on a train. I can get you out of here. You have to come." And they're like, "No, F you again." And he's like, "Let me talk to Yuri alone." So he takes Yuri out into the hallway, and he says, "Here's the deal. These men that I'm with right now are an escort. Tomorrow they're going to come back as a firing squad, and they're going to kill Katya and Lara. So you've got to come with me."
Right. Well, he also points out that he will not take Katya and Lara without Yuri.
Right. Well, Lara says to him, "I'm not leaving without you."
Right. But he even says, like, they're worthless to me. Like, he needs Yuri for something. Yeah. He does not need Katya and Lara.
Yeah.
So he's basically saying, yo, dude, if you don't come with me, they're not going to be safe at all. So you might as well come, so they'll come.
Yeah.
I know you hate me, but tough
toenails.
S. Tough toenails, nice.
So they agree to go with him. And they load up in the sleigh, but there's not enough room in the sledge for Yuri.
Right.
So he's like, I'm right behind you. So they drive off, and he runs into the house, and we're not quite sure what is going on, but he runs in, he desperately gets to the top, and he can't get the ice off the window, so he just breaks the window, the glass out, so he can watch them just go over the crest of the hill and disappear. And they get on the train, and Yuri doesn't show up when the train's got to leave, and he's like, your guy's not going to come. And she's like, he was never going to come with you.
Yeah.
And this was all just to get us out of here. And essentially that's what we learned. Like, he was desperate to see them leave because it was the last time he was going to see what he had claimed as his new family. And she informs Komarovsky. Thank you. All these names.
So many syllables.
She's pregnant with Yuri's child.
Oh, right.
Zhivago's child.
Oh my gosh.
Years later, the brother, Zhivago's brother,
right, we
tells us that he found Yuri like destitute and emaciated in the streets of Moscow, and he fed him, and the brother Yuri begged him for a suit, and he clothed him and got him a new job. And one day he's on the train, the trolley, which we saw at the beginning of the film, and he's looking out the trolley on his way to work, and he sees Lara walking down the street, and he can't get off the train. When it stops, he can't get off because people are getting on, and he gets stuck, and he eventually like moves his way through the people, and at the very next stop he gets out, and he's right behind her, and he goes to call out for her, and he's like hobbled, he's limping and stuff.
The brother mentions his heart had gotten really weak too.
Yeah, and he goes to call out, and all he lets out is a gasp. He starts removing his tie, and he's following her, and he has a heart attack in the street and dies. Very sad.
Extremely sad.
Yeah, it's very sad. It's the most heartbreaking thing in the film.
That there is the most romantic scene in the movie.
Although he shouldn't have been going after her. He should have been going after Tanya. I do
agree with that. But boy, oh boy, for as much talk as I heard about, it's such a romantic movie. It's the most romantic movie, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's mostly a horror show about war and revolution and destitution. And then there's a couple of romantic things.
So at Yuri's funeral, there's just a line of people coming to visit the grave.
Right.
Like, just a crazy amount. And basically, the brother says that even though his work was banned, people found it anyways. And people, if they love the poetry, they love the poet.
Right.
So all these people come to pay their respects. And Lara shows up, and she goes to introduce herself, and she says, I'm Lara. He's like, I found this manuscript in my brother's belongings called the Lara poems.
Right.
They're beautiful, so this must be you. And she informs him that she had a daughter named Tanya.
And
they were in Mongolia, and they were separated.
Yes.
And she's looking to see if she can find this girl. And so he tries to help Lara. And they don't have any luck after a lot of searching. And she was working in these labor camps, these Stalin labor camps, and she died or disappeared. But probably she died, and her name was mixed up with someone else's number, and they have no idea what happened to her.
Yeah, he mentions like it was probably like falsely labeled in a file that's been mislaid somewhere.
Yeah. So anyways, that's the story, and so...
and he also mentions that he fell in love with Lara while they were doing that.
Yeah, and yet another person that fell in love with Lara.
I think that's number 4.
So he wraps up the story for this girl, Tanya, at the dam, and her maybe boyfriend or husband
David
comes to pick her up from the office.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, it's okay, and the guy's like, what do you do? And he's like, I'm a conductor. And he's like, what do you conduct? And she's like, really proud of him. She's like, this. And she points out to the dam and all the water flowing out of the dam, which is really cool. And Zhivago's brother, or I should just call Zhivago, is fairly convinced that Tanya is his niece, but he's not 100%. And she would have to agree to it too, to sort of like everybody buy into it.
Yeah.
And he's like, will you consider it? She says, I'll consider it, and we'll talk later. He's like, I think I could do something for you.
Cool.
For your family.
I like the sound of that. He's trying to be a good guy.
And as she's walking away at the end of the film, Zhivago notices she's carrying on her back the balalaika.
Not the balalaika. A balalaika.
Yeah, I was a little unclear if it was A or the.
Well, his was like bright red with
right, but
chrome all around it, and hers was just kind of wood colored,
beat up. Yeah, but Lara, when she's on the train with Komorowski at the end, has the balalaika with her. He gives it. Zhivago makes sure he gives it to her in the sledge, so she has the balalaika, and it's 20 years later.
Right.
So. Could it have gotten beat up? Could she have could the paint have been scratched off of it? Yeah, maybe.
True.
So, I don't know if it was I like to think that it is because it makes a nicer story in my head that she had this balalaika. That this balalaika somehow survived Yuri's childhood all the way through and it was bequeathed to his own child.
Zhivago's rosebud, if you will.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then he asks how she learned how to play, and her boyfriend's so proud of her, and he's like, she just taught herself. He's like, it's a gift.
It's a gift.
And that kind of goes back to the beginning of the film when the kid gets it, and the mother, Yuri's mother, can play it
right
exquisitely.
But Yuri says he can't play it at all.
And so it sort of comes full circle.
Maybe it skipped a generation.
So that is Doctor Zhivago.
Dr. Zhivago. It took us, we amazingly explained it in less than half the time it took to watch it. But boy, oh boy. If you've never seen it, go ahead and watch it. Drink a lot of coffee.
What did you like the movie?
I think I enjoyed it as it went along.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I could put myself through that ever again.
Yeah, I liked the movie. I don't know that I want to watch it again. However, I feel like if I did watch it again, I probably would pick up more stuff.
Quite possibly.
Just because I was really trying to get the story, and there's so many names, and they're so different from what we're used to.
Very true.
There's different political factions and things that it makes it difficult to so you really got to pay attention. I think if I watched it again kind of already knowing the story, I might be able to pick up on some other things. And that's a little bit unfortunate for the podcast, because I think that's part of why we do the podcast, is we want to talk about these things we picked up and we just don't really get. There was this other shot that I really liked.
Yeah.
Where Lara comes out of a building, and you see two towers, those little onion tower-y things, and the shot is looking down on her, and she comes out and she stops in between the two of them, and I think she's in the snow, and then she just all of a sudden turns right. I'm not exactly sure what the meaning of it is. I just thought it was a really beautiful moment of her making a decision, and it just looked really cool to me.
I'm trying to figure out where that happened.
Yeah.
Maybe I dozed off.
Yeah.
Because I dozed off within the first 15 minutes of pushing play on this thing.
But you stayed awake for pretty much the rest of it after about 30 minutes, right? I mean, you were...
Yeah, I never dozed off and just stayed asleep at all. Yeah. But there were a couple times throughout the movie where I would just kind of, nod off, wake back up, that sort of thing. Let's talk about Over the Edge.
Well,
wait, you have one more thing.
Let's just kind of get a couple more things out for this. When the movie came out, it was savaged by critics.
Really?
Yeah.
For being 3 1/4 hours?
No. They referenced Newsweek said stuff like hack job sets and that had pallid photography. And I guess I could understand sort of the it's not that it was desaturated in any way, but everything is snowy.
Right.
Almost the entire film. I get that there's not a lot of color in there. I thought they did a good job balancing that with when she shows up in that red dress in the red room. I mean, it is red. It is beautiful. And when the people get murdered in the street, they don't have a lot of blood. I think probably for ratings wise, to not get censored. But the blood that is in the street is super red.
Yeah.
So. I kind of understand what they're saying, but
red is the Soviet flag.
But David Lean, who also directed Lawrence of Arabia, which is also another really long epic,
right?
I love,
which is in our bucket, if I'm not mistaken.
It is in the bucket. I love Lawrence of Arabia. I think it's a much better film than this one.
Yeah.
But he was so affected by the criticism that at one point he swore he'd never make another movie again.
Whoa.
Yeah. If you were to adjust for inflation, this would be the 8th biggest film of all time.
Wow, really?
Yeah. It's the second highest grossing, adjusted for inflation, the second highest grossing film for MGM, just behind Gone with the Wind.
Wow.
And I think Gone with the Wind is the all-time leader if you adjust for inflation.
Right. I believe that still is the case.
But despite all of that, this movie grossed more than every single David Lean film combined outside of this one.
Dr. Zhivago.
Yeah, I mean, it has a really... You hear the same Lara's theme throughout the thing, which is music played by Balalaika.
Yeah.
My mother had a music box when I was a kid that played that. And the second I heard it, I was like, that's that song from that music box.
Wow.
This album, the soundtrack to this, sold over like 600,000 copies when it came out.
Jiminy Jaminy.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal, this song.
Yeah.
So now I think we can kind of wrap up. I just wanted to get a few interesting tidbits out there since we talked so much about such a slow, confusing plot.
Very plotting, very they took their time.
What was the official coffee countdown on that?
Like 12 minutes, I think. I remember. I don't know exactly when we pushed play, but I remember dozing off and then really quick checking my clock, and it was 10:32 a.m.
Yeah.
Booyah. Hey now. Let's talk about 1979's Over the Edge.
Yeah, this is also kind of a downer, but
but a peppy downer.
But yeah, it was a very different film.
A very different film.
Than the last one.
You had never seen this, correct?
I had never seen this movie, and I would not have recognized Matt Dillon.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he was so young in this.
Alrighty, so I first saw this movie, I think probably somewhere back in like 98-ish, 99-ish, because I remember the first time I saw it, sort of thinking like, whew, boy, glad I'm not up to any of that nonsense anymore.
Right.
So Over the Edge is a movie, 1979. It stars a very young Matt Dillon and a young man named Michael Eric Kramer. Matt Dillon plays Richie White. Michael Eric Kramer plays a kid named Carl Willett. And let's see, they live in a brand new housing development called New Granada.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's ever specified exactly which state New Granada is in.
They imply New York, I think.
No, it couldn't be New York.
Yeah, because they move. Carl moves from his family's moved from New York, and then the girl moved from Chicago. And I think there was sort of a reference that maybe it was New York.
But they're always talking about Las Vegas, Houston, Reno.
Well, the Houston guys flew in from Texas.
But I feel like it's got to be somewhere much further west because it's so just flat and like prairie-like. I almost think maybe it's around like Tahoe or something. Heck, I don't know. Anyway, New Granada. Mm-hmm. It's this very remote, very, Levittown kind of little boxes, tiny boxes, song absolutely. Kind of place. Just a bunch of houses all built the same.
Agrestic.
Nothing around. There's a school, there's a convenience store, there's the houses. That's pretty much it. There's not a lot for these kids to do, and virtually every household in the town has at least one kid, right?
Well, they tell you at the beginning of the film, too, that it's based on it's inspired by some true events, and that
in 1978
there were you go ahead and say that.
It was something like 110,000. There were 110,000 arrests made in America in 1978 for like juvenile vandalism and
like
petty theft, probably drug use too. But basically, this is a story about kids who are taken to a place where there's nothing to do, and then treated like animals because they get into trouble.
Well, and that they are building these townhouses and condos,
right,
where more than half the population is under the age of 15.
Right.
So that tells you something about how out of touch the adult community is here.
Yes. So here are all these adults in New Granada. All right. So it starts with Carl and Richie. They're just chilling, they're minding their own business, and these two other kids, Mark and his buddy, the gorilla, I don't know if they ever give that kid a name, Mark and his friend are up on an overpass with a BB gun, and they take aim on a cop car that's approaching on the road below them, and they shoot at the cop's face through the windshield. The windshield cracks, the car goes spinning out of control. Amazingly, nobody's hurt. But now the cops are on the lookout for this BB gun kid and his buddy. So those two go tearing through town on their bikes, and they pass Mike They pass Carl and Richie, and the kid with the gun, played by actor Vincent Spano, in case you didn't recognize him. The kid's like, "Get out of here, man! The cops are right behind us! Hide, hide!" For no reason whatsoever, Richie and Carl decide they better hide from the police. Now, they're just walking along, minding their own business. They decide to hide from the police. They jump down behind like a circuitry box. Mm-hmm. The cop totally sees them, stops his car, gets out, arrests those two because Richie has a knife on him. So now Richie's in more trouble. He's been in trouble plenty of times in his life. Carl's maybe having like his first or second run-in with the law. I think it's safe to assume these kids are, 15? Maybe 14, right? Mm-hmm. I think 15.
Yeah, well, I mean, they say that, I think they mentioned that Carl is going to turn 15. Or is it
something
about
like
to turn
that.
15.
Yeah, because he says, then once you're 16, like, no more games, it's for real or something like that, yeah. So these kids are 14-ish, 15-ish, and they're just bored suburban kids, right? Mm-hmm. So now they're bored suburban kids who've got an arrest record. Of course, Carl's parents aren't happy about it. Richie's mom, it's clear she's sort of probably some sort of ex-hippie-ish kind of lady. She's just like, man, these cops got nothing better to do than harass my kid. Now, Richie's a troublemaker. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about it. He's carrying a switchblade. He's constantly coming across fireworks. And
he's been arrested for breaking and entering.
He's been arrested for B&E, So he's not exactly the best kid in town. Mm-hmm. And when they're under arrest, one of the cops says something to him about like, you better, the law, blah, blah, blah. And Richie's like, I only live by one law, man. My law is any kid who tells on another kid is a dead kid.
Yeah.
And then the cop says, yeah, that's going to serve you real well in prison one day. And Richie's reply is?
Yeah, it will. Right? Something like that.
Well, damn straight.
Oh, damn straight.
So Richie's just...
I don't know the movie the way you do.
That's okay. Richie's just fully embraced a criminal lifestyle. He probably has no real idea what he's getting into.
There's something really likable about him.
Oh, absolutely.
There's something... He is kind of a punk, and he does kind of like flip his finger at the law, but...
Right. But he's got all that feathery hair.
Yeah.
He's got his name on the flag on his bike.
I think part of it is the fact that initially they're arrested for no good reason.
Right.
That they're brought in for something they didn't do.
Right. They had nothing to do with...
And they're immediately treated as the people that perpetrated a crime.
Right. Right, absolutely. The cops are just, we're looking for two teens. There's two teens. They're under arrest. And, of course, they won't squeal on Mark, the kid who actually shot at the cop car.
Right.
So, gosh, what happens? We see a little bit of their school life the next day.
The one kid takes some acid, drops some acid instead of speed.
Yeah. Carl and Richie have a good friend named Claude. Claude goes into their art class, and he talks about how, oh, man, I'm so ready for this test because I took some speed. And then... minutes later, he's like, I think that speed I took was actually acid, man. And then what's he say? He says, I'm flashing, man. And then it keeps showing a very famous painting. I forget who it's by, but it's a very famous, very trippy painting of like all these weird body parts and people with like bodies made of eggshells, and there's people living inside them. And it just keeps cutting to Claude's face just being all sweaty and disturbed by these images. And
almost like... Is he seeing this painting or is he seeing something else? But like I thought it was really humorous because it was like almost like, what if he wasn't actually on acid? What if he thought he took acid but he wasn't? Just because of how messed up the painting is. But then he saw that painting and was like, I'm definitely on acid.
Yeah. So poor Claude has to deal with this trip. Then later, maybe that night or a couple nights later. Oh, we should also point out. So we're introduced to Carl's dad. Mr. Willett
Cadillac dealership
owns a Cadillac dealership in town, and he's in cahoots with this other guy named Mr. Cole.
Jerry
Cole, who, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, rather, is not a parent. Jerry Cole is just working together with Carl's dad to try to lure these land developers in to buy the land across from the youth rec center and turn it into, more condos?
More condos. So we at some point do learn that they started building condos and townhouses and homes, and they ran out of money.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole bunch of unfinished homes there, too. So they need these land people to come in. And
right. But do they? Because it seems like, frankly, this place has just enough homes for just enough people.
Well, if they want to grow, they need these people. Which is what they say they want to do.
Yeah. But also, Carl laments, like, well, what are you talking about, Dad? Like, I thought they were going to build a movie theater or a drive-in theater and a bowling alley there.
And there's a great moment.
Something fun for kids and families to do.
Yeah, when his dad picks him up from the police station and they drive by the sign where the new townhomes are going to go.
Right.
They're covering up the sign saying that the fun stuff, the family stuff is going away.
Right.
This stuff is coming. They're covering that up with these new signs. And it's like the most telling thing for the kids that nobody listens to them. Nobody cares about them.
Right, exactly. Their voices go unheard. You know, I remember growing up hearing a lot of the old adage, children are to be seen but never heard.
Right.
I don't think there's much of that going around these days, but I can remember hearing that a lot from grandparents' friends and that sort of thing.
Right.
For crying out loud. So here's these poor kids. They're 14 years old. It's 1979. There aren't even video games yet, man. Well, there might be arcades somewhere. Not in New Granada. All they got is the convenience store, the rec center, and drugs.
And the rec center's like ping pong tables, pool tables.
Yeah,
foosball.
Some sort of weird indoor basketball hoop.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make any sense. And an airplane out on the lawn for some reason. I don't know what that's about. A couple of things to climb around on outside. So now it's nighttime. I'm assuming it's a Friday night because the kids go to party at the rec center.
Yeah.
And Claude, kid who just barely made it out of that acid trip, buys some hash from a dude named Tip. Tip is a sinister, platinum blonde-haired, looked like he was probably on the Dogtown and Z-Boy skate team. Tip sells Claude some hashish.
And was the one who sold him the acid.
And he was the one who sold him the acid.
Yep.
Now he's selling him some hashish for like $12 a gram, man. Claude thinks it's too steep, but he buys it anyway. Everybody's chilling, having fun at the party, drinking, getting to know each other.
I'm sorry. You're getting to the other party.
Suddenly, Richie shows up out of nowhere, and he's like, yo, I just heard about a better party. Let's go.
But the reason that Carl, the real reason Carl went to the rec center in the first place, was he was looking for something.
For Corey.
He was looking for Corey.
She's the real fox.
Yeah.
So Corey's this red-haired girl that Carl's got the hots for.
And they imply has maybe been with a few boys.
Right.
We see her smoking out of a car window at some point.
Yeah, while her dad's driving her around. Ugh. So Richie hears about the better party. They go to the better party. Now, this party is clearly in some sort of even deeper suburban part of town. Because a lot of these places are like condos. They're kind of houses all built together. Mm-hmm. This kid's house is like its own standalone house in a pretty spaced, far apart kind of neighborhood. Richie and Carl and Claude's little brother, they all go in. They start partying. They're passing around J's, this, that, and the other thing. Carl finds Corey making out with Mark.
Yeah.
The kid who first shot the cop car that set all these damn...
That got them arrested.
Yeah, that got them arrested. Mark spots Carl, and he's like, yo, man, give me a hit of that joint. Carl's like, hey, you got me in a lot of real trouble the other day. And Mark says, he literally says something like, it doesn't matter, man, as long as you didn't mention my name to the cops.
Yeah.
So even Mark, a fellow kid, is just like, whatever I can get out of anybody, I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
And then he says, because if you ever mention my name to the cops, I'll, put you in the hospital or whatever. Make some sort of skinny ne'er-do-well threat that he couldn't possibly back up.
Sure.
Cops show up, the party's busted, the kids all scatter in every direction. What happens next?
Carl walks home alone.
Carl walks home alone, and Mark and his big gorilla friend jump him in front of the rec center.
Beat the crap out of him.
They beat his face so bad, and this is where kind of the main score of the movie comes in. Mm-hmm. And for my money, it sounded very sort of Italian, and I thought it was supposed to kind of be some sort of this is the kind of stuff they play in the mobster movies. Let's play a little bit of this here. But then you hear it with various instrumentation as the movie goes along. So Mark and his gorilla buddy are just beating up Carl like crazy, beating him up. Carl goes home, and when he gets home, his dad is meeting with Jerry Cole in the living room.
Yeah.
Carl comes in with his face all bloody and bruised up. So now Jerry Cole and his dad are like, oh no, the kids are going to make our town look bad, man.
It's that rec center. It's that damn rec center.
Yeah, that damn rec center that's giving these kids something to do. That's the problem, right? So Jerry Cole decides, I'm going to let the police chief know to close down the rec center for when the Houston guys come in to take a look at the land and hopefully save our butts. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? Mission failed, because the next day at the rec center, the cops go to close it down, and instead they wind up causing a huge scene, arresting Claude because they find the hashish on him. And right as they're arresting Claude, dragging him out with all the kids yelling and throwing stuff at him and whatnot, that's when the guys from Houston are brought on by in the new Cadillacs that Carl's dad lent out.
And Richie's up on top of the
Richie's
car.
standing on top of the cop car making a scene. The cops are making the scene, frankly. So it's like these fools, if they had just been like, you know what, let's let the kids stay at the rec center for the day, that's something to do, they could have avoided all this hassle.
I thought for sure when they go in to arrest Claude and everybody's like giving him a hard time.
Yeah.
Richie sneaks out. I thought for sure Richie was going to steal the cop car.
That would have been fun.
Yeah.
But alas, he did not.
He did not.
Somebody steals a cop car later in the movie.
Yes.
But it's a cop stealing another department's car.
Yeah.
For crying out loud. So
they arrest Claude.
Richie and Carl go out farting around. I think this is where they acquire some firecrackers.
Yeah, Richie gives Carl the firecrackers.
Yeah, and he's like, give him to Claude, he can smoke them. And then they bump into Corey and her very tall friend, whose name I don't think we ever learn.
Yeah, I don't know.
And they have just come out of robbing somebody's house, and they've stolen a revolver.
Yes.
A handgun. 2 teenage girls stealing a handgun, right? Mm-hmm. Richie's like, whoa, you better let me hang on to that. I know a guy who can get you $150 for this gun, man. They go and hang out in this house that's not finished being built yet. Richie and Carl call it their condo. And they're basically like, check out how cool we are, man. This is our little...
Got boombox.
Our little hang... Yeah, we can hang out here. We got a boombox here. And now we can play with this gun. And the girls are like, well, we got some shells, too. Oh, wait. Oh, even more fun than that. Stupid Corey is dancing around playing air guitar with the gun. There's a lot of, hey, watch me air guitar going on in this movie. Right. It's very strange. These kids love to show off how good they are at air guitar. Corey's dancing around with the gun, and she literally starts pointing it at Carl's face from a few feet away and just kind of dancing with it, and then fires a bullet.
Yeah, and Carl falls down.
At his face, and Carl falls down and plays dead, and everybody's like, whoa! Somehow he did not get hit, and he barely cares that he just got shot at either. Mm-hmm. So, they take off for the night.
They decide they're going to meet up another day and do a firing range kind of thing.
Yeah, they say, we stole some shells too, so let's meet up and shoot this thing out in a field somewhere. Claude's been let out of jail. Carl gets him on the phone. They're all going to go shoot the place up, right?
Well, there is something that happens before that.
Oh, yeah.
With the car.
With the firecrackers.
Yep.
You're correct. So Richie goes home Carl goes home after nearly being shot, sees the place where the dudes from Texas are staying, borrowing one of his dad's Cadillacs, see them getting out of their car, heading into the house for the night. Jerry Cole and probably his dad are driving away in the other Cadillac. Mm-hmm. The music gets to this huge, dangerous crescendo, and it's like something's about to happen.
Yep.
Next morning, Texas guys come out, start the car, and all these fireworks blast off under the hood.
Yeah.
Carl has loaded the fireworks into the car. They're all popping off under the hood. The car's probably being destroyed from within. And then it cuts to Jerry Cole on the scene. The Texas guys are leaving in a taxi cab. And what's his name? Sloan, who's sort of the shot caller for the Texas group. He says, you people were in such a hurry to leave the city that you turned your kids into exactly what you're trying to get away from.
That was like the most poignant thing in the whole film.
Exactly. Because even Sloan, this rich guy from Texas, who's here to, do business, even he realizes these poor kids are being treated like dirt.
Yeah.
And because these people are treating them like dirt and can't keep them in control, I can't do business with these jagaloons.
Yeah.
Gosh. So then where does it go? So then the kids go, they shoot the gun, and it is discussed that Claude must have gotten busted because somebody tipped off the police.
Yes.
Who better to tip off the police
than Tip?
than Tip.
But before they go deal with Tip, they all fire the gun, and everybody misses except
Carl.
It's not a huge thing, but it is slightly important.
Yeah. Well, he does take another pretty good shot later in the movie.
Yeah, and that's why, yeah.
So they go visit Tip. They're like, yo, man, you told on Claude, you're a rat, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, with his mother being able to see from a distant tennis court, they point the gun in Tip's face, and then they throw him over the edge of a deck, I guess you could say. Not quite a balcony. Yeah.
And Tip can't swim.
Apparently he can't swim. Did he say he can't swim?
He says, no, I can't swim, and then they throw him over. They tip him over.
I feel like anybody who's about to be thrown into the water should yell, I can't swim, just to see if maybe the other guys will have sympathy for it. But yeah, so they dump him over this railing. He falls maybe 6 feet into the water.
Yeah.
Not a big deal. It's a man-made lake. He's probably fine. But his mom's like, oh, I'll see you in jail. Yeah. The kids all run off with more stolen goods because they went into Tip's house and stole a bunch of stuff. Next day at school, Richie's in science class. For some reason, there are windows looking into the science class. Or no, Carl's in science class. Mm-hmm. Carl manages to hear Tip's mom, and what I'm guessing is the school principal, looking through the windows of the class and asking, are these the kids that threw your son over the deck and put a gun in his face? Carl manages to hear that. They don't see him. He runs away, gets Richie. He's like, Richie, we got a bail, dude. They go running out of the school just before the cops pull up. They manage to literally like hide behind a building as the cops are going around to park in front of it. Cops park, kids keep running. They go to Richie's house. Richie steals his mom's car keys, and he gets the gun, the revolver. They go on the run in Richie's mom's Ford. You have something to say?
No, I was just going to add, they're going to sell the gun.
They're going to sell the gun.
And they're going to run away.
And they're going to run away to wherever, man, any direction. Carl puts on some Jimi Hendrix music, and proceeds to show Richie how good his air guitar is, while Richie's driving away in his mom's Ford. Sure enough, a cop gets behind him. Sergeant Doberman.
Sorry, Sergeant Doberman.
I'm not sure if he's a sheriff or just a police. There's all that county, township stuff going on. Sure. Sergeant Doberman is behind them. Richie's like, man, I can burn him, dude. He goes, does some off-roading, winds up flipping the Jeep. Mm-hmm. They get out. Richie says, run in opposite directions. You can't chase us both. Who's he going to chase? He's going to chase Richie. Richie, the dummy, the 14-year-old dum-dum with an unloaded gun on him, turns, points it at Doberman, and like, Doberman...
Fuck you, pig, or something like that.
I think he does say that.
Yeah.
Something close to that. Doberman shoots him dead.
Yep.
Carl just continues running because at worst, Doberman might kill him. Mm-hmm. At best, he gets arrested and charged and sent to jail. So Carl's on the run. He goes and hides out in the unfinished condo. Corey comes to see him. She brings him a sleeping bag.
They get it on.
I'm assuming they get it on. At the very least, they probably kiss and fall asleep together.
His shirt's off the next morning and his pants are undone.
Oh, you're right. So they have some stuff.
At least some frisky fun.
They have some kind of frisky fun in that sleeping bag. Also, what was weird about the condo was there was a copy of a painting tacked up on one of the 2x4s. Mm-hmm. And it looked like something by the movie The Girl with the Pearl Earring. Mm-hmm. What was that artist's name? It looked like something he would have done. And I'm like, why would that be hanging in a 14-year-old kid's clubhouse, essentially? I thought that was funny. Anyway, so Carl's like, yeah, man, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but, thanks for bringing me this sleeping bag, and, you're not in trouble. Get back to town. Maybe I'll come looking for you. Carl goes sneaking back into town. He sneaks into his house while his mom's home. His mom's on the phone with Dad. Have you seen him yet? Yeah, he's trying to find money, and he needs a fresh shirt. So he can hear that his parents are on the phone, so then he picks up the extra phone, and he's like, you jerks, I'm still mad, and, that pig killed Richie and what have you. You're never going to catch me. Hangs up, sneaks out the window. His mom never catches him. All the parents are called to a big meeting at the school.
PTA meeting.
A PTA meeting at the school. Jerry Cole is for some reason in charge of this meeting, even though he ain't no dad. Officer Doberman's there. The cops pull up, and you distinctly hear Doberman say to one of his other officers, he says, leave your guns in the car. Like, what do you think this is? And so now we know all the cops have left all their guns in the car.
Right.
Whee! They go in, they're having the meeting, talking about how, it's your kid's fault. And if it's your kid's fault, that means it's your fault because you're not disciplining these kids, and blah, blah, blah. And Jerry's pointing the finger at the kids and the parents, and Doberman's pointing the finger at the kids.
Well, and Jerry's like, and we're never going to get the property levels to rise.
Yes, yeah. He's going on about resale values and property value and this and that. And so then Carl's dad, who's been a pretty hard guy on Carl.
Yeah.
I mean, he slapped him once. He's, they had that big argument before the slap.
Telling him he can't hang out with his friends.
Yeah, he's like, you can't hang out with Richie anymore. And then, oh man, I wish I could remember Carl's line that pisses his dad off so much, but it's beautiful. And he just like says this line that just throws it right back in his dad's face. And his dad just goes, oh shit, like that. Like he's just like, he knows the kid's right, but he wishes to God he had anything to trump that, and he just doesn't. So he slaps Carl in the face. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Now we're caught up. The PTA meeting's going on, and all the kids converge at the rec center, and they decide they're going to work together and just go to the school and do something.
And this is sort of brought on by the new friendship between Carl and the BB gun kid. Mark. So when Carl's sort of on the run, he encounters Mark. Mark is living in a tent, like by
down
by the river,
swamp.
kind of a thing. Yeah,
yeah, like just by a mucky
and he's out riding
tide pool.
Yeah, he's riding a dirt bike, and Carl picks up the BB gun and nails him with the BB gun and
shoots him in the
okay,
chest mid jump.
He's like, we're even now.
Yeah,
and he compliments his marksmanship and all that. And so when they go to the rec center and they come up with this plan, it's kind of like half Mark, half Carl. Like Mark shows up, Carl's got his arm around the girl that Mark was making out with earlier in the film, and you think maybe they're not going to be friends after all. And then they do their little bro shake.
Well, Mark literally salutes him and says and
he puts his hand
reporting
up
for duty or something like that. Yeah,
and Mark's like, you know what? They're all going to be in one place. This is the perfect opportunity to nail them all. And then Carl sort of gets this idea.
And then when they get there, Mark says, all it would take is one stick of dynamite, man.
Yep. Which
is terrifying. Yep. I don't know. I've had some disagreements with my parents. I've never wanted to throw a stick of dynamite into a room they were in.
So the kids go to the school to cause some terror. And he makes that comment. And I want to point out. So the movie is based... Yeah. They don't say where it takes place. The movie is based on a town a true story near San Francisco.
Oh, okay. I would have never expected.
It was shot in Colorado.
Oh. It was?
Yep. The town it was shot in Colorado is next. Is a developing town.
Yeah.
And the sister town that was being developed right next to it was Columbine.
No way.
Yeah.
Weird.
So it's kind of interesting that Mark's like, all it would take is just one stick of dynamite.
And this movie was 79.
Yeah.
Columbine was 99.
Yeah.
Holy shnikes.
It's crazy, right?
That's really crazy.
Yeah.
I never knew that piece of information, and now I'm not exactly happy that I do. The kids, Carl sneaks up onto the roof of the school, knocks open like some sort of weird skylight, sneaks down into the school and starts scouting around, and he figures out he can lock all these adults in with just a couple of bike chains by pulling these hallway gates closed. I went to a school with hallway gates. Did your school have hallway gates?
I think they just had doors.
It was so weird.
Yeah.
Such a weird thing. Like, why is it after 7 o'clock I can't take this shortcut through the hall? Yeah. Also, what am I doing in the hall after 7 p.m.?
Sure.
Anyway. So he pulls these gates closed, chains them up with bike locks, and then other kids start sneaking into the school. They chain the doors that would let the adults escape to the parking lot, chain those shut, and all the while they're doing this, they're sneaking around and doing this, and Officer Doberman's on the stage at the PTA meeting, just blaming everybody for everything, talking about how it's even Jerry Cole's fault for, calling this meeting here, and blah, 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 and this and that. And
the girl from the rec center who's getting fired.
Yeah, the girl who's getting fired from the rec center stands up, and she's saying,
was his gun loaded?
Right.
You killed a kid with an unloaded gun?
Yeah, and of course Doberman's like, how was I supposed to know? He probably didn't even know it was unloaded. all that sort of thing. And so now the kids are sneaking into the school. They're raising hell. They start smashing up the cars. They start blowing up the cars out in the parking lot.
They reveal themselves to the people in the meeting.
Yeah, because Doberman sees Mark running away from the door after just chaining it up.
Yeah.
He doesn't see him chaining it up the whole time.
I don't think it was Mark. I think it was Claude. I think Mark chains
Was
up
that
the
one
door,
Claude?
and then Claude comes up and flips him off.
Huh. I thought the flip-off came off
I could be wrong.
after...
but
I think it was he noticed Mark running away from chaining the door, and then Claude and them showed up at the other door.
flip off. Oh, maybe it's possible.
Something like that.
Yeah.
The kids are raising hell.
I mean, they're burning cars, including the Jerry's fancy antique car.
Right. Jerry has that really nice old Cadillac.
Convertible.
They set that on fire.
They bust open the cop car and
get all the guns out. Frickin' Mark. Yeah, Mark's riding around on his BMX with a shotgun pointed over and just riding at other kids and just pulling the trigger and hoping they get out of the way in time.
Corey dives out of the way, but also gets caught in a little bit of an explosion of some debris that happens at the same time.
Because he shoots a car in the trunk and it just blows up completely.
Yeah.
Which is strange. Seems unrealistic. Then, thank God, what's her name? The lady who runs the rec center. Mm-hmm. She's just out in the hallway chilling while all the rest of the adults are inside just going crazy, freaking out, pointing fingers, blaming everybody. And she spots little Johnny on his skateboard skating through the hall. Johnny never says a word through the whole movie. And she says, "Johnny, come here." And Johnny likes her. She's the nice lady from the rec center. She asks Johnny to bring her a phone from a nearby office. He pulls it over as far as he can. He can't get it to the gate. She says, "Can you just dial 0 for me?" He does. More cops and fire department.
And he skates off.
Skates off. Yeah, he's Johnny. He does it, helps her out, gets out of there. She calls operator, fire department, what have you. They all start showing up. They bust the adults free, but of course by now all the kids have totally scattered.
Yeah.
They're running off wild in the streets.
There's another moment, too, that I want to point out that I really liked. When all the chaos is going on, Carl sees Richie. Or thinks he sees Richie.
He sees a kid riding away on Richie's bike.
Yeah,
because Richie's bike had been left at the school.
And the kid didn't look like Richie to me.
No, not really.
He was on Richie's bike. But I was reading that Matt Dillon is in that scene.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I was kind of like, maybe it's Matt Dillon at first.
That's funny.
And then maybe they change it to another kid when they cut back to him again. But I don't know. But apparently Matt Dillon's in that scene because he didn't want to be left out of all the craziness and the fun.
I wouldn't either.
So they let him be in that scene.
That's funny you say that.
So he sees this kid on Richie's bike, and he goes and chases after him. And it's almost as if seeing Richie's bike and Richie's name and the kid that looks kind of like Richie kind of snaps him out of this.
Yeah.
It's like he's done with this now.
Right.
They made their point. He remembers his friend who died for something really stupid, and he gets kind of snapped out of it. And he kind of comes back and walks around and observes what's going on, but he doesn't participate in very much of this.
Yeah, and some other kids even offer him something, like, "Wait, we got this stolen whatever, man." And he's just like, "Nah, I've had enough."
Yeah.
Yeah. That's. I'm glad you noticed that, because I remember seeing one kid in the riot scene and thinking, that really looks like Matt Dillon, but like they barely showed his face.
Yeah.
And then his hair was combed very differently.
So the kids all scatter.
The fire department breaks the adults out. Doberman steals a different cop's car from, they were probably state police or county sheriff or whatever, and he goes tearing through the night, specifically trying to get Carl.
And he does.
Catches up to him. He's like, "Carl Willett, like, if you don't stop running right now, I'm going to," what's he say? He's like, "I'm going to tag you or something." He's like, "I'm going to get you like I got Richie or something."
He says, "Don't end up like your friend Richie."
Yeah, don't end up like your friend Richie. Carl stops. Like Doberman arrests him.
Handcuffs him in the back of the car.
Handcuffs him to the car. So Carl's got one hand hanging up, handcuffed high to the security gate inside the car. Driving away. I don't know if you could call it saving the day, but stupid Mark with his shotgun is aiming up as the cop car approaches. His big gorilla friend flips the car off. Doberman sees that. Mark shoots. It looked like he hit the headlights.
He hits the headlight.
The car crashes into the rec center.
And hits a propane tank.
Hits a propane tank. I'm not sure why there's a propane tank that close to the rec center. It seems like a bad idea. But the car wings the propane tank, crashes into the rec center. Thankfully, it's empty, and the whole place goes up. Doberman's dead behind the wheel.
If he's not dead, he's definitely unconscious.
Sure, he's unconscious. I think it's safe to assume he dies.
I mean, he definitely hit his head on the windshield.
Yeah, he's bleeding from the forehead. Carl manages to get his keys, free himself, and go running out of there before the whole place explodes even more.
Now he's definitely dead.
Now Doberman's dead. And then what? Doesn't it just cut to like the next morning?
The next day, and they're bringing the kids out. Some of the kids out of it's the civic center,
right? And basically all of the kids have been arrested.
Yeah,
pretty much.
It's a short bus full of kids.
Yeah, they're all in a bus. I would say it's probably short.
The tall girl's in there.
The tall girl's in there.
A bunch of other kids.
A whole bunch of kids. Mark's in there. His gorilla buddy's in there.
Yeah.
They're being driven away to the Hill, which is where the juvenile detention center is.
Yeah.
They go under an overpass, and there's only 3 kids up there to see him off, and it's Corey, Claude, and his little brother.
Johnny.
Somehow, those 3 weren't arrested. Pretty much every other kid in town seems to be on their way to jail.
Well, we know why they weren't arrested, right? Because we know they left ahead of everybody else.
That's true.
Corey is on the ground, and she's like, "Sorry, the son."
Okay.
She says, "Do you know where Carl is?" She asks Claude, "Do you know where Carl is? I just want to go home."
Yeah.
And she's definitely been hurt. She's bleeding, and Claude goes, "Come with me. I'll get you home."
Okay.
And it would be safe to assume that his little brother would go with him.
Yeah.
So they left ahead of all the other kids, which is why they wouldn't have gotten arrested.
All right, that makes good sense.
And I like to think that the overpass that they're on is the same overpass that started the film.
I would have to say so. I can't imagine where there would be another overpass in that flat hellhole. And then it cuts back to the kids on the bus, and Carl is looking out the back window, and he sees that the girl he likes is waving him goodbye as he heads toward jail.
And in his head...
And he seems pretty happy about it.
In his head, she's going, "I'll wait for you."
Yeah, and then the 5 stair steps. Well, no, a cover of... what's it called? Ooh Child?
Ooh Child.
Ooh Child by the 5 stair steps. A cover starts playing.
It was supposed to be Baba O'Reilly, but they couldn't get the rights.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, Baba O'Reilly by The Who. Yeah. That's another thing we got to point out. There's tons of good rock and roll on the soundtrack for this movie. A couple Van Halen songs, at least one Ramones song.
Surrender too much, though.
Really?
I feel like they played Surrender 2 or 3 times in that film.
I felt like Surrender only came on once.
No, definitely twice, because it definitely comes on. The first time is when Carl's listening to it on his headphones.
Yeah.
The second time is when they're in the condo and she's dancing to Surrender.
Oh, that's right. Okay. I think I'm so worried about the gun in that scene that I forget what song is being played.
Yeah.
But that's it. Carl and most of the kids get sent to jail, and I imagine his dad's auto dealership does pretty well after they destroyed darn near every car in town.
Yeah, all those station wagons that aren't Cadillacs.
Yeah. So hopefully everybody there is going to go buy from Carl's dad.
So I looked up some tidbits, some fun tidbits.
Let me hear them.
Here, hold on one second. I'm going to fix it so you're not being blinded for the next couple minutes.
Okay, I will vamp while you fix that.
Vamp away.
Dear Lord in heaven, is this our longest episode ever?
I don't think so.
Dear Viewsters, if you're listening, tweet at us and let us know how much you enjoyed Doctor Zhivago and Over the Edge.
So,
let us know.
So, a couple things. Apparently, this film was a major inspiration for Nirvana and Smells Like Teen Spirit. Yeah, apparently Kurt Cobain said that it pretty much defined his whole youth.
Wow.
That film.
All right.
Yeah. And Matt Dillon, this is his first movie.
That makes sense.
He didn't even want to audition for the movie.
Wow, really?
He just wanted to skip school that day. So he auditioned for it and got the part.
So he literally got the role by Richie Whiting his way into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
That's pretty much. I said everything else. I think.
I know that there's a pretty cool video. I think it's by maybe the Screaming Trees, where basically they recreate the whole riot scene. But I think they do it in daylight.
Yeah.
And they for one of their songs. If you know the name of that Screaming Trees song, please tweet it at me at Steve and No Howood. Send me the YouTube link. I want to watch that video.
Steve, let's move this on so we can draw these.
Yes, let's
next movies. Okay, so we're gonna have one more podcast in September, and then we're going to be doing a special thing for October. Do we want to say what that is now?
Sure.
So in October, we're going to do both of our podcasts. All the films will be horror films for the month of October for Halloween. So I'm pretty excited. Did you draw Dune?
I don't know what I got.
All right, what you got? That's the one.
Hang on, let me go under.
Use the other arm. Use the other arm. Thank you. We're sitting pretty far away.
We like to sit on opposite ends of the room.
What you got?
Double Indemnity.
Double Indemnity. Going with the old ones again.
Look, I don't get to choose.
All right. Whew, another old one. All About Eve.
Oh, Double Indemnity and All About Eve for next time, Viewsters.
So we'll do those two classics, and then we'll go into horror. So we've got a brand new bucket just for the horror films.
Yeah.
A bunch of movies. Unfortunately, I've seen most of them, but Steve hasn't seen any of the ones that are going in there. I think there's one that we haven't both seen. But
I think we should have to watch that one.
Let's see what happens.
Okay.
All right. So thank you very much for listening to another episode.
Happy Labor Day.
Thank you. Yeah, happy Labor Day. It's Labor Day today when we're recording this. Thank you for all the Facebook likes and the love on Twitter. Please hit us up, Steve at NoHoWood.
Yes, please.
Movie Hippo and No Lag Gamers. And we will see you in a couple weeks. Bon Cinema.
Ooh.